Welcome to Fans of the Forge, and this is our wrap-up for Forge and Fire Season 6, Episode 3, Washington's Colichemarde. We had 4 contestants, but first, to my right we have...
Teresa.
To my left we have...
Today I'm Sean.
Versus any other day?
Yes.
Good to know that.
Good to know.
And I'm Chris, and we move into our contestants. First up, we had Dan Burlows. He's a part-time smith, 17 years experience, and he is a metallurgical engineer. So he comes in with maybe a little bit of
fancy man
background information on what's going on when you're forging a blade.
Knowledge is power.
So then we had John Sims. He is a part-time bladesmith, a hobbyist bladesmith. He has 2 years experience. And then Andrew Smith was part-time, 10 years experience. And Josh Nicolaitis, who is also a part-time smith with 5 years experience.
So for round 1, they were given a round stock of W1 to forge a Rough Rider Bowie, and they had really tight parameters for this one. 9 to 9.5 inches long, 2 inches wide at the base, and a 3 to 3.5 inch clip point. And the parameters and stock were given to them on a scroll. It was very fancy.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and especially for the way that this all ends up turning out. We'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Dan, the engineer, starts with measuring, which, good idea, because they had to make effectively a replica. He took his calipers. He's up there measuring what they had to make.
Well, you know what they say. Measure twice, cut once.
Yeah. So as he's working, he discovers a cold shut in the tip of the blade and takes an angle grinder to it. And then later on, when he's quenching, he decides to go for an edge quench. John starts out doing well and thought it was too long, so he cut the tip off, and then it looked too short. We'll see how that pans out.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because then he wouldn't necessarily have enough material to stretch it to the 2 inches wide and the 9.5 inches long.
Andrew draws out the width first so he can get that 2 inches. And then he does a quench test with a piece of scrap metal. So it was interesting that in our last episode we were discussing, was it Chris that had done the quench test?
Yeah, it was. Yep.
And they're like, oh, we've never seen this before. But now we've got another person doing that. So that's interesting. And
Dave Baker was on this one, and he was the one highlighting the fact that he was doing it. So he missed it on this last episode, and then they let him talk about it on this one. But yeah, interesting.
And then Josh, he starts out by drawing out the length. And so he draws it out really long, and he ends up cutting off a few inches. And then as he's trying to get the correct width, the blade just keeps getting thinner and thinner. And when he goes to quench it, he picks up a warp. So then for judging, of the 4 blades, 3 of them did not meet parameters.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so they had this fun game where Will asks them, who do you think messed up? And so Dan, John, and Josh step forward. But Dan is asked to step back because it was Andrew, John, and Josh who had missed the parameters. So Dan, I guess, was like, I must, gotta be me. And Andrew's like, nope, I'm good. But it was not Dan. He met all the parameters, Mr. Engineer Measurer. John was under the appropriate length. Andrew was over the length. And Josh was over the length and under the width. So I would just think, okay, Josh is the one that's going to go because he missed 2 parameters, right? But no, they decided to test the knives that are there at that point, which they usually don't do without handles. So they were tested on merit, and Ben was doing the testing, hitting them twice with a baton on a giant nut. John makes it through with no damage. Andrew, the tang broke after the second or on the second strike.
Yeah, that really sucks.
Yeah.
To see that happen.
And then, but even before the test, I'm like, well, what if a couple of them break while they're doing this test, and then they have to go into round 2? Like, that's silly.
Yeah,
like, it's a destructive test. It's not like just damaging the edge. Obviously I broke a blade. So I was like, and then that breaks. I'm like, that sucks.
And you think about, because it broke in the tang. Like, if he had a fully affixed handle to that, would it have broken like that? It might not have.
Yeah.
Was that something, though, that if he made it through, could he weld that back on and put the handle over it?
That's kind of what I was thinking,
now?
too.
I think it's okay when it's in the tang. You don't want to have a weld on the blade itself if you can avoid it. But I think if you can have it in the handle area and then have a good weld and then cover it up with some somewhat strong handle material, you might be okay.
And I wonder if they were heat treated before they did the test. They didn't say.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because then it wouldn't be so brittle going into the test.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because aren't
Generally,
they heat treated between rounds 1 and 2? Because they just kind of take the
They are,
on
yeah.
into
But
making
I don't
it.
know when they did it. Did they do it right after round 1 or before round 2?
I think it was before
I
round
think it's
2,
before
because then they
round
moved
2.
on into round 2.
Magic of TV.
yeah, who knows?
Who knows? And then Will says, Josh, your knife has to survive 2 blows to the nut. Something like that.
You knew something like that was going to come out when they brought up this.
Yeah, the big nuts.
Well, Josh made it through with no damage. So Andrew got the boot.
Mm-hmm.
The nut did him in.
So for round 2, they had to attach a 4-pin Coffin buffalo horn handle with filework liners and brass guards with lobes. That's a mouthful. But it was a very distinct handle style. The Coffin style of handle is always kind of a neat one to see because it's not common.
Yeah.
But I've seen a few of them, and just that shape of a coffin, it always gives everything you see with it has a morbid look now, right? And so it just kind of made this knife that much more badass to have like that coffin-looking handle. So Dan, he starts again with the calipers, measuring.
Oh, it worked the first time.
Worked the first time,
Yeah.
so might as well stick to it. And he was doing pretty well until he realized he had 15 minutes left to sharpen his edge and shape his handle. So I guess that 3 hours flew by for him. John, he paid more attention to making more precise measurements in this round. But he did cut off too much material on one side of the guard and not enough on the other. And he needed to make another guard in under a half an hour. So another time crunch right there. And then for Josh, he discovers there's a gap between the handle and the guard, and he loaded up with epoxy. What else are you going to do? You can't fill it in with anything else. That's the easiest thing.
Yeah, hopes and dreams aren't going to cut it.
And so for testing, they had the moose antler chop test, 6 chops on a moose antler. Dan, his edge held up perfectly, although he did have some minor sharpness on part of the handle. John's guard was quite loose, and he had a roll on his edge. And Josh, Ben noticed that he had gaps, but otherwise the blade held up perfectly. So, it definitely is a destructive test. It's hard to say. Is that worse than hammering it against a big nut? Because that's metal versus antler.
Right. Both
Antler's
hard.
tough.
Antler is tough.
But they were able to cut into it,
That's true.
even though it was very hard.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, so 2 of these knives had already basically gone through a strength test of sorts and then managed to get through another one. And then they had the fish slice sharpness test. Dan's cut clean through all 4 slices, and he was a nice balance to his knife. It will cut.
cut it in half.
Did he cut it in half? It cut it into 4
You went
pieces,
1,
right?
2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Half of a half.
At some point, there was a half.
It was in half. All right, so John, he cut through cleanly 3 out of 4 of the slices, and the one time it didn't, Doug said that he ran out of blade, not that it wasn't sharp. It was
Right.
that he ran out of blade for the way he was swinging it.
And they all had to be so close to 9 inches that he was just probably standing half a step too far back.
Yeah. Yeah, as easy as that. And then for Josh, he also cut cleanly through 3 out of 4 of the times. His handle was a little bit out of line, but it was a very sharp blade, and it will cut. And that then comes down to John getting the boot because it was the only blade to take damage in the strength test. We move on to round 3.
Round 3. All right. These guys were tasked with making the
Colichemarde.
Colichemarde.
How do we say that again?
Is it written here?
No.
No, it's not. Okay, great. So round 3, these guys are tasked with making a Colichemarde, which was a dueling sword that was popular in the late 17th century in favor of George Washington. The blade must be between 31 and 33 inches in length, trifoil with a forte between 9 and 12 inches in length. The handle must include a pommel, knuckle bow, and a perforated, decorated oval guard.
Very complicated.
Yes, lots of things going on there.
Mm-hmm.
So for Dan on day 1, he starts his forging, and what do you know? He ran out of propane. I don't even know how far he got before it ran out because I didn't even see him like put steel in there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think he was
pretty
like
much right away.
Yeah.
He went to and he was like, oh, and no gas.
No gas.
So he had to run to the store, get some gas. On day 3, his grinder shorted out and caught fire. So then he had to run to the store again and get a new motor.
Jeez, it really got crazy there
Yeah.
for this episode. Like a lot of crazy stuff going on. But first the propane, then the grinder, like up and just sparking and shooting some fire out. It was pretty messed up.
On day 5, he was in good shape with his blade and decides to work on a little bit of extra stuff. He made mokume for the pommel. Used a lot of time on that and was cutting it close on time to sharpen the blade. So that's important.
Mm-hmm.
You want a sharp blade when you go finish your knife or your blade. So moving on to Josh on day 1, spent forging a blade and was working on trifoil. Day 2, I was working on making it lighter by grinding and ended up grinding a hole through the blade.
Ooh.
And tried to fix it with a MIG weld, but burnt through it. So we had to start over. So maybe just adjusted the temperature of the machine a little bit lower. Would have been all right, but he blasted right through it.
What, the welder you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And on day 4, I had a second blade done and was working on the hilt and pommel using a muzzle loader rifle barrel. That was a kind of a neat touch.
Yeah, it was.
So moving on to testing. So there's a pig carcass kill test. Doug was going to throw some harassing cuts and thrusts. So Josh, Doug noted that it had some nice weight to it. The edge is sharp and it will kill. Dan, the harassing cuts didn't break the hide.
None of them.
It was like I slapped a pig around with your hand and get the same result. And the tip was aggressive. The blade actually took a bend, but because it was able to thrust, it will kill. For Dave, he was doing tip cuts and thrusts into some cherry wood.
Washington theme.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
For Josh, he had a lot of pointy bits on the guard that dug into Dave's hand. Otherwise, it passed the test. For Dan, the blade did not bend back to true. The heat treated failed. The bend got worse. So
that was part of what Dave was doing, right? It was like pushing it in.
Pushed it one way and then pushed it back the other way.
And it's supposed to come back.
Right.
So Doug performs the sharpness test with some slashes and stabs into some sandbags. For Josh, it was a very sharp edge. It stayed true. It was easy to align, and it will cut. For Dan, Doug couldn't perform the test because of the bend, thus creating an unfair test because it was so bent he couldn't index it and know where the tip was. So
Right.
Because of that, Josh won.
Wow.
So
Congratulations.
Yeah, good job.
Josh Nicolaitis is the guy's name. And yeah, that was a good win. He made a nice sword. And it was interesting. I saw on Facebook today, Derek Melton had made a comment to these two guys saying, "Welcome to the Small Sword Club."
oh,
So it was a good episode. Back to the normal format of things, which, well, I guess that's just going to be how it is. So we'll have to see how it goes. But it's a good one. And yeah, that was it. That was the episode.
yeah, not
So other than that, what else is going on?
bad. Nothing.
Nothing really.
No.
Nope.
All right. See you later.
Before you go, please remember to like, subscribe our videos and podcasts, and review us and give us some 5-star ratings.
Let us know who you want us to interview.
Yeah. We got a couple ideas for people that you might want to get interviews from us on. So let us know if you want any other ones, and we'll do what we can. We are going to Blade Show, where a lot of these guys will be, and we will try to get as many interviews as we can while we're there. So keep that in mind. And remember to watch our Instagram account, because we will be announcing that 1,000 follower giveaway very soon as we get the components in.
All right.
And that's it.
And Tour de Forge coming up soon.
Tour de Forge probably came out already.
All right.
By the time this comes out. So
Have fun watching that.
yeah,
Go check it out.
Yeah, with that one, we worked with Ryan Brewer of Brewer Blades out of Worcester, Mass.
Yeah, we got a lot of work done.
Yeah, we did. It's what did I call it? Bevels and tangs and heat treats.
Oh my.
I didn't do them. I just did that. I thought it would be too on the nose, but
You're probably right on that.
Whatever.
Anyway, that's the episode. Thank you for listening and watching and all that good stuff, and we will catch you next week.
See ya.
Bye.
Ready?
Yes.
Ready? It's unnecessary.
Did you start with the middle finger?
It sure looked like it.
What?
Or was it 3 fingers? It looked like you flipped off the camera.
See, from my perspective, I'm looking at you side on. It looked like you just flipped off everybody.
Yeah. All right.
Is that what you thought too?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Because all we saw was your middle finger.
No, I wasn't doing that. I was doing a countdown.
All right.
I have more tact.